want to tell you why I think you should pay attention to Korea, why it would be really wise, and why it would be really wise if you're thinking about looking forward in the world. If you want to be forward-looking and not backward-looking, you pay attention to Korea. And it's just amazing, quite fascinating how for somebody like me who's really interested in world history and is interested in the rise and fall of nations and cultures and the rise and the fall and the rise and the fall, I am 100% convinced that the next rise is in the East. No question about it. And if I had children, my children would be studying about Korea. They'd be learning Korean. I would be sending them to study abroad in Seoul, not to Rome, not to Paris, not to London. I would be, listen, go for it. You want to be part of the future of the world? You go east. Think east. Imagine east. If I were running a university, these would be the language programs that would be blowing up. These would be the cultural programs, the things that we'd be studying, because I'd want my students to be looking forward. Look, let me just show you a couple of things. I know we don't like numbers. GDP, gross domestic product. So this is the sum total of all the finished goods and services that come out of a country. The finished goods and services, including things that are sold internally and that are sold externally. And let me show you this. In 1965, in the UK, the GDP in the UK was $100 billion. In South Korea, it was $3.1 billion. South Korea was a poor country. Like poor. The GDP in Ghana in 1965 was higher. The GDP in Algeria in 1965 was higher than in South Korea. The GDP in Malaysia, in countries all over the world that I could list them out and you would say, wow, those are really poor countries, were higher than in South Korea. In 2019, the GDP in the UK is 2.8 trillion, and in South Korea, it's actually about 1.6 trillion. South Korea blew up. Things happened in a really, really serious way. Probably in the history of the world, in my study, in my understanding of the world, there's never been a country that has been able to do what South Korea has done economically. Never has happened. And if you want to it's just like thinking about where the future is. You don't go backwards. If I said, hey, we want to think about the future of energy, and here's what we need to do. We need to reopen a bunch of coal mines in the United States. You'd be thinking, man, you're like looking backwards. In fact, you're looking so backwards, you're looking inside of a closet somewhere. And what are you talking about, coal mines? That's not the future of energy in the world. And you want to know what the future of technology and commerce and moving forward, you start looking in this direction. Utterly fascinating. Dude, I have nothing in particular. There's nothing about Korea or anything that I feel like somehow connected to. I'm an American. I'm just a person that's looking at this stuff. So here, let me show you one thing. So the Koreas, how many of you have heard of this word? Wow. Okay. So you're going to get something today. So the Koreans did something really, really fascinating. First off, just in terms of commerce, right? You know Samsung, right? So that's a Korean company, LG, Korean company. I mean, we can go Hyundai. I mean, there are all sorts of car technology companies. So this is all Korean. In 40 to 45 years, 50 years, that has happened. Okay? But the Koreans also had some other idea. And they said, look, we can try to compete in the world economically. But, we got to go up against some countries that are way further advanced than we are. And we're going to take a risk if we put all of our eggs in that basket. And we can do that. It'll be really interesting, and we'll probably go much further than we would if we didn't do anything. But it's still a bit of a risk. But there's one area of the world where we could exert our power in ways that nobody's necessarily looking, and it's a wide open space. So The automobile industry is really dominated by a small group of people, the Americans, the Europeans, the Japanese, by the time you get to the 1970s and so on. The electronics industry, okay, we can start busting into that a little bit, but there are all these other clothing industries, all sorts of. But the one industry that we could bust into is the cultural industry. And so I had this idea. This is a Chinese word, and it means literally Korean wave. And what the Koreans said was, you know what we could do? We could put our energy into culture, selling culture and getting other people to consume culture, including consume our culture. And we'll focus on television, we'll focus on music, we'll focus on movies, we'll focus on any number of things that where we can put our energy, and we'll sell it to the world. And that's wide open because people are going to consume the kinds of things that are really interesting to them. And so the Koreans did that. They started what's called the Korean wave, which is where, if you have the idea that, this guy, the singer Psy, or all these K-pop bands, this idea that this just emerged out of nowhere, it didn't emerge out of nowhere. It was a very distinct, concerted effort on the part of the Korean government and the Korean people to push these ideas in this culture out around to the rest of the world and get the rest of the world to consume and to buy it. And so something like K-pop didn't just emerge out of nowhere. It was years and years and years of very careful crafting and very careful movement forward. Utterly fascinating. And now it's this global phenomenon that people all over the world are consuming and buying and being fascinated by. And it happened just like this. 3 years ago, I came into this class and I said, hey, how many of you know BTS? And 10 hands went up in the air. And then last year, I said, hey, how many of you have heard of BTS? And almost the entire class raised their hand. And that's how quickly this stuff happens. So there's this movement in pop, in Korean pop, of male features. This dude's cool. Men, right? Men in here, right? This dude is a dude that Korean women find really sexy and handsome. Got it? Here's a dude. And so look at him. Look at what he's got. Makeup. So we got makeup. We have dyed hair. We have soft features. And you got the abs. All this. Got to have the abs. So this dude is like the classic K-pop guy. Right? And if you look at all these K-pop stars and one after another, you see these photos and you see the guys are all the same and they're handsome. They're cute and they're handsome. And they're considered to be really, really attractive, and not just by 18-year-olds and 15-year-olds, but by 30, 40, and 50-year-olds. You can be a guy in the West and be thinking, yeah, no, that's not really cool. You got a movement in the world called K-pop, driven by a culture that is unlike any culture we've ever seen in the world, where the essence and the style of masculinity, of cool guys, cool men, are guys like this. This is BTS. This is the band that really has put K-pop on the charts. Look at these guys. This is the future. And I'm going to put my money on the idea that this trend where these men represent the future of masculinity in many parts all over the world is probably very likely to happen.